Answer the crack in the mountain, cold open hook. Imagine walking into a canyon. The walls rise more than 100 meters on either side. Sheer cliffs of red and gold stone. So close in places that you could almost touch both at once. The path twists and twists again deeper into the mountain. The sky narrows to a thin ribbon of blue far overhead. The air goes cool and still. For almost a kilometer you walk in shadow, swallowed by the rock with no idea what lies ahead. And then through a final crack in the cliff, you see it. A glow of rose-colored stone. And rising out of it, impossibly, the shape of a vast temple. 40 meters tall, its columns and statues and great carved urn cut directly into the sheer face of the mountain. Not built, carved, chiseled out of the living rock by hands that have been dust for 2,000 years. This is Petra, and it is one of the most astonishing places human beings have ever made. It was the capital of a people we barely understand, desert nomads who somehow came to control the richest trade on earth and poured that wealth into carving an entire city into the cliffs of southern Jordan. For a few centuries, it was a glittering crossroads of the ancient world, and then it slipped away. Its trade gone, its water failing, its people scattered, until the city in the rock was abandoned to the desert and the Bedouin, and the wider world forgot for 1,000 years that it had ever existed at all. This is the story of how a people with nothing built a wonder of the world, and how they vanished. A people from nowhere, the Nabataeans. To understand Petra, you have to understand how unlikely it was, because the people who built it, the Nabataeans, did not start with cities, or farms or kings. They started with nothing but the desert. They were Arab nomads, wandering tribes who lived in the harsh, dry lands of northern Arabia, moving with their herds from one watering hole to the next, owning little, building nothing permanent. The ancient Greek writers who first described them were almost baffled. These people, they reported, had no houses, planted no crops, drank no wine, and built no homes, and they had a law that no one among them was allowed to. They were ghosts of the desert, here and gone, leaving no trace, and yet within a few generations, these same wandering tribesmen would be building one of the wealthiest and most beautiful cities in the entire ancient world. How? How does a people with no cities and no farmland become rich enough to carve palaces into the mountains? The answer comes down to two things: a road and a secret. The incense road, how they grew rich. First, the road. Across the ancient world, from the temples of Egypt to the altars of Rome, there was one thing every civilization craved and could not make for itself: incense. Frankincense and myrrh, fragrant resins bled from twisted trees that grew in only one place on earth, the far south of Arabia, in what is now Yemen and Oman. Burned in every temple, used in every funeral, demanded by every god and every king, these resins were so precious, they were quite literally worth their weight in gold. And to get from the south of Arabia to the markets of the Mediterranean, they had to cross more than 1,000 miles of merciless desert. That desert belonged to the Nabataeans. This was their genius. They knew the waterholes that no one else knew. They knew the safe paths through a landscape that killed outsiders. And so they made themselves the masters of the incense road, the guides, the guardians, the camel drivers, and above all, the middlemen of the desert trade. Caravans of hundreds of camels, loaded with frankincense and myrrh, and with spices and silks carried up from India, and rare goods from every direction, moved north through Nabataean lands, and the Nabataeans took their cut at every step. They sold water, they sold protection, they sold passage, and at the heart of their territory, at a vital crossroads where the trade routes met, sat a hidden valley in the mountains that would become their capital. They grew rich beyond anything their nomad ancestors could have dreamed, not by making anything, but by controlling the road that everything else had to travel. The secret of water, their true genius. But a road was not enough. To turn that wealth into a city in the middle of a desert, the Nabataeans needed their second secret, and it was the more remarkable of the two. They needed water. The land around Petra is brutally dry. It receives only a few centimeters of rain a year, and most of that comes in sudden, violent flash floods that roar through the canyons and vanish into the sand within hours. To most peoples, this was a death sentence. To the Nabataeans, it became an art form. They became some of the most brilliant water engineers of the ancient world. They crossed their desert, and through the canyons of Petra itself, they built an extraordinary invisible system, carved channels and ceramic pipes to carry water for miles, dams to tame the flash floods and divert them away from the city, and hundreds of hidden cisterns cut into the rock to store every precious drop through the long, dry months. They learned to catch a flood, slow it, clean it, and save it, turning a few hours of chaos each year into a year-round supply. This was more than survival. It was power. In a desert, the people who control the water control everything, and the Nabataeans hid their water sources from outsiders so that an enemy army marching against them would simply die of thirst in the sand. Their reservoirs were a weapon. Their engineering was a fortress made of absence, and it was this mastery of water more than anything that allowed a city to bloom in a place where no city had any right to exist. The hidden valley, the site of Petra, and what a place they chose for it. Petra sits in a basin hidden among the mountains of southern Jordan, and the only easy way in is through that great canyon, the one we walked at the beginning. The Nabataeans called on the natural genius of the landscape. That winding gorge, the Siki, runs for more than a kilometre, and in places it is only a few meters wide with cliffs towering overhead. It is the perfect gateway to a stronghold. A handful of defenders could hold it against an army, and an invading force would be strung out helplessly, in single file between walls of solid rock. Behind that gateway lay a wide, sheltered valley ringed by cliffs, defensible, hidden, and sitting astride the trade routes that made the Nabataeans rich. It was a treasure house and a fortress in one. Here, safe behind their canyon and their secret water, the desert nomads put down roots at last and began to build a capital worthy of their wealth. But they did not build it the way other peoples built cities. They built it into the mountains themselves. The city in the rock carving Petra. The stone of Petra is sandstone, soft enough to carve, and banded with the most extraordinary colors. Rose and pink and crimson, gold and amber and white, swirling through the rock like the grain of some vast living thing. And into the towering faces of that stone, the Nabataeans carved their city. They cut tombs and temples and great monumental facades directly into the cliffs, not blocks assembled on the ground, but architecture chiseled out of the mountain from the top down, dozens of meters high. Over generations, they covered the valley walls with hundreds of carved monuments, until the whole basin became a city of stone facades glowing in the desert sun. And the masterpiece, the building that stops every visitor's breath, then and now, is the one that greets you through the crack in the sick. We call it the Treasury. 40 meters tall, its face is a dizzying fusion of styles from across the ancient world. Greek columns, Egyptian motifs, Eastern gods, carved with impossible precision into the sheer cliff. It was almost certainly a royal tomb, the resting place of one of Petra's great kings. Its name comes from a much later legend. The Bedouin who lived among the ruins long after the city was abandoned believed that an ancient pharaoh had hidden a vast treasure inside the great stone urn carved at its very top. For years, hopeful treasure hunters fired guns at that urn, trying to crack it open and spill the gold, and you can still see the bullet marks today. There was never any treasure. The urn is solid rock. But the name stuck, the treasury, and the legend tells us something true, that even centuries after its fall, people stood before this place and felt sure it must be hiding something wonderful. Beyond the treasury, the city opened up, a great theater carved into the hillside with seats for thousands, cut astonishingly, straight out of the rock, a broad colonnaded street, temples and markets and grand houses, and high above, reached by a long climb up the mountain, an even larger monument than the treasury, the building we call the monastery, its facade nearly 50 meters across, looking out over the desert, culture, gods, the lost script, and yet, for all their wealth, the Nabataeans remain one of the great mysteries of the ancient world, because they told us so little about themselves. We know they worshipped their own gods. Chief among them was Dushara, a great god of the mountains, and strikingly, they often represented him not as a human figure, but as a simple block of unadorned stone, a god without a face. Beside him stood goddesses like Al-Uzza the powerful. High above the city, the Nabataeans cut altars and platforms into the mountain peaks, high places open to the sky, where they made their offerings closer to heaven. They created exquisite things, pottery so fine and thin it is almost translucent, painted with delicate designs, among the most beautiful of the ancient world. And they wrote in a flowing script of their own, descended from Aramaic, a script that mattered far beyond their kingdom, because it slowly evolved over the centuries that followed, into the very letters of written Arabic. Every word of Arabic written today is, in a sense, a distant descendant of the script first carved on the tombs of Petra. But here is the strange thing. For all these inscriptions, the Nabataeans left us almost no literature. No histories, no chronicles, no story of themselves in their own words. We have their tombs, but not their voices. Almost everything we think we know about them, we have pieced together from the writings of outsiders, Greeks and Romans and Jews, and from the silent evidence of the stones. A whole brilliant civilization, and we are still in many ways guessing at who they really were. There is one last sign of how confident, how playful with their wealth they had become. In the heart of this desert city, archaeologists have found the traces of a great garden and a vast pool, a pleasure garden of water and greenery, blooming impossibly in one of the driest places on earth. To grow a garden in that desert was the ultimate luxury, the ultimate boast. It said, "We have so completely mastered this impossible land that we can afford to waste water on beauty. We can make paradise out of sand." The shadow of Rome, but there was a shadow falling across the Nabataean world. The same shadow that fell across every kingdom of the ancient Mediterranean. Rome. As Rome expanded east, swallowing kingdom after kingdom, the Nabataeans found themselves in the path of the greatest power the world had ever seen. And for a long time they survived in the cleverest way possible, not by fighting Rome, which was hopeless, but by being useful to it. They became a client kingdom, an allied state on the empire's desert frontier. Independent, but careful, paying their respects, lending their soldiers, managing the relationship with the skill of a people who had spent centuries negotiating with everyone who crossed their land. It worked for a while. Once Rome even sent an expedition deep into Arabia to seize the source of the incense trade for itself, and the desert defeated it. The legions came back broken by heat and thirst and distance, having achieved nothing. The Nabataeans, masters of that desert, endured where Rome's army had failed. But the survival of a small kingdom on the edge of a hungry empire is always borrowed time. Rome wanted the trade and the taxes, and the order that direct rule would bring. And in the end, it simply took them. Annexation 106 AD. In the year 106 AD, under the Emperor Trajan, the kingdom of the Nabataeans came to an end. There was no great war, no famous siege. As far as we can tell, the last Nabataean king died, and Rome moved in and annexed the kingdom, folding it quietly into the empire as a new province with a fitting name, Arabia Petraea, Stony Arabia, named for its rock-carved capital. After 4 centuries, the line of desert kings was over. But, and this is important, the city did not die with the kingdom. At first, the opposite happened. Under Roman rule, Petra carried on and even flourished. The Romans built a fine colonnaded street through its center, paved with stone. New monuments rose. The city was honored with grand Roman titles. For a time, a visitor might have thought Petra was as glorious as ever, simply flying a new flag. The kingdom was gone, but the rose-red city still glowed in the desert. Its fall, when it came, would be slower and stranger than conquest. It would not be killed by an enemy at all. It would be abandoned by the world. When the roads moved, the slow decline, because the thing that had made Petra, the thing that built every carved facade and filled every cistern, was the trade. And slowly, quietly, the trade began to move away. Rome had learned to sail, rather than haul goods across 1,000 miles of desert by camel, paying tolls at every Nabataean waterhole. Merchants increasingly sent their cargoes by sea, up the Red Sea and through Egypt, bypassing the old caravan routes entirely. And to the north, a rival desert trading city, Palmyra, was rising to take over much of the overland trade that remained. The great river of commerce that had flowed through Petra for centuries began to find new channels, and a city that exists only because it sits on a road has a terrible vulnerability. When the road moves, the reason for the city moves with it. Petra did not collapse overnight, but the caravans grew fewer. The wealth thinned, The frantic, world-connecting energy that had carved a city out of the mountains began slowly to fade. The desert that the Nabataeans had held at bay for so long started, patiently to wait. The earthquake 363 AD, and then, in the year 363 AD, the earth itself turned against the city. A massive earthquake struck the region, and it devastated Petra. Buildings collapsed across the valley. Facades cracked, but the cruelest blow was invisible. The earthquake shattered the very thing the city most depended on. The intricate network of channels and pipes and cisterns, the brilliant water system that had made life in the desert possible. Without water, a desert city cannot survive. And with its wealth already fading, Petra no longer had the resources, or perhaps the will, to rebuild that vast system completely. Some of it was patched and repaired, but the perfect machine of Nabataean engineering was broken, and once it failed, the desert had won. More earthquakes would follow in the centuries to come, finishing what the first had begun. Slowly, the people drifted away. There was a final flicker of life. In the Christian centuries that followed, a church or two was built, and a few of the old tombs were turned into chapels. But the great city was emptying. The carved temples stood silent. The grand street lay buried under sand and rubble, and one by one the lamps of Petra went out. The lost city, abandonment and rediscovery. By the time the medieval world had run its course, Petra was gone. Not destroyed, but abandoned, forgotten. The city in the rock was left to the desert, and to the local Bedouin tribes, who made their homes among the ancient tombs, grazed their goats in the ruined streets, and passed down stories of the strange and beautiful place their ancestors had inherited. They knew it was there. But to the world beyond the desert, to Europe to the west, Petra simply vanished. For something like 1,000 years, it became a rumor, a name in old texts, a lost city that scholars half believed and could not find. The exact location was a secret, kept by the people of the desert, who had no reason to share it with strangers. And then in 1812, a young Swiss explorer named Johann Ludwig Burckhardt heard the rumors. Traveling through the region disguised as a Muslim scholar, fluent in Arabic, he caught wind of magnificent ruins hidden in a mountain valley that no European had seen. He knew he could never simply ask to be taken there. A foreigner showing too much interest would be suspected as a treasure hunter or a spy. So he invented a reason. He told his Bedouin guide that he had made a vow to sacrifice a goat at the tomb of the prophet Aaron, which lay beyond the ruins, and so, almost by trickery, he persuaded the guide to lead him in. He walked down through the Syke, that long dark canyon, just as you did at the start of this story. And when the treasury appeared through the crack in the rock, glowing in the desert light, he became the first European in centuries to lay eyes on it. He could not stop and stare, that would have given him away. And so he passed through quietly, committing what he could to memory, and carried the secret back out of the desert. The world learned that the lost city was real, and a few decades later, an English poet who had never even been there gave Petra the words it has been known by ever since, calling it a rose-red city half as old as time. Half as old as time, reflection and dust. Today, Petra is a wonder of the world. Millions of people walk down the Syke each year to feel that same jolt of astonishment when the treasury appears. The Bedouin who guarded its secret for so long lived among its caves until very recently, when the valley became a protected treasure of all humanity. The rose-red city, lost for 1,000 years, is found, but stand in that silent valley among the carved tombs glowing in the evening light, and the deeper story is hard to escape. A people came out of the desert with nothing, no cities, no farms, no monuments, only their herds and their knowledge of the sand. By mastering a road and a secret, they made themselves rich enough to carve a capital into the living mountains, a city so beautiful that travelers 2,000 years later still gasp at the sight of it. They built a kingdom and a culture, and gardens of water in the heart of the desert. And then the roads moved and the water failed, and the world they had connected forgot they were ever there. They left us their tombs, and their bullet-scarred treasury and a script that became the writing of a whole civilization, but barely a word of their own story. The mountains keep most of their secrets still, and the great rose-red city, the masterpiece of a vanished desert people, stands empty in the sun, a monument to how completely even the most dazzling achievement can be left behind, until it becomes what every empire in the